what's shaking, Warfighter Nation? Ron here with Warfighter Ranch and Isaiah 6'8". And today we have a Thanksgiving message for you. It's a uniquely American holiday. Not just we're the only ones who celebrate it, but because thankfulness is a core value of warfighter culture. If you've ever spent a Thanksgiving downrange, then you know what it is to be truly thankful. And that's what I wanted to talk about with you today. I only had 3 combat tours during my time. However, these are 3 of the most special Thanksgivings that I've ever had, and they were all in combat. Mind you, my perception of them at the time and my current view are mostly a world apart. But one thing definitely remains consistent: the love I have for those who I served with in those places. Pretty much every day in Mogadishu was the same, but compliments to the command for laying out an excellent holiday spread which uplifted morale. For a minute, General Jack Keane, then commander of the 101st Airborne Division, left the division, thankfully, home for the holidays that year. And was he home with his commanding general's quarters, carving a turkey with other flag officers or his family? He was there with us, the 68 of us who volunteered from throughout the division. Say what you will, but the man had my respect. Came to find out later that during his inspection of our area, he had climbed through our plywood 2x4 apartment complex that we'd built on the inside of this shot-up building, and apparently he saw a fire helmet hanging in my hooch. The fire helmet was found in a Connex earlier by my first sergeant, and he said that since I was the only 51 Mike on SOAR base, then I was now the fire department. Other duties as assigned. Later in the day, we met him, and I was introduced as Specialist Breland, the fireman. I thought it was kind of odd at the time, but I pretty much blew it off. Later on that day, we all clustered in the same building, an enormous hangar-like building, which was about as long as a football field. It was a maintenance bay converted into a chow hall for a single day. Honestly, it was a lot of work, a lot of trouble for even just a single meal. And no, never mind the tactical faux pas, putting nearly the entire camp in a single structure. But I digress. When we were all served, we sat down to eat together, and right about as soon as we did, these mortar rounds came flying in, and the windows on top of the facility there, they all, in the blast, they all shattered and sent shards of glass raining down all over pretty much everything and everyone. So that was Thanksgiving '93, and back to work. In 1999, I was chosen to be the Task Force Falcon Fire Chief in Kosovo for Operation Joint Guardian. Thanksgiving Day that year, after cutting everyone down to a skeleton crew and only the bare necessities, I released the majority of the department to take some well-deserved downtime. Those guys and gals worked incredibly hard during that tour. I worked the duty chief position myself that day, and nothing really substantial happened. We always expect an attack on a major holiday, but today that didn't happen. I was young and on fire, and I had just had my first fire chief position at 29 years old, and, who needs sleep, right? It was post-traumatic and undiagnosed from the MOG, but I had always just thought that I had an exceptional amount of energy. After all, I was a paratrooper. It seemed to serve me well. However, with it came a lot of insomnia and usually a crash somewhere thereafter. I blew it off. You know how we do. But after a long day of not much happening, we were treated to a very nice meal in the newly opened Brown and Root dining facility. They truly served a first-class Thanksgiving meal for us, and I can't ever be thankful enough to those dozens of Filipino staff that worked tirelessly to provide this amazing meal for us. I spent a lot of time driving around the camp, basically a moving fire watch. But that night I found myself in the uptown area of the camp, and I walked into this warming tent. The DFAC staff would keep a tent heated at night with hot soup, coffee, and cookies for the guard shifts and personnel who worked through the night. I'm not going to lie, firefighters can sense when food is near, and those cookies were flippin' amazing. It's tent, and there was an older soldier sitting in the shadows in the corner wearing a PT uniform, drinking coffee by himself. I blew it off thinking that it was just another National Guard soldier, as we had had so many there during our tour, and many I saw for the first time in combat. I was in a duty uniform with my rifle strapped across my back. As I poured myself a cup of infamous Army Chow Hall coffee, an international blend of spices made by the lowest bidder, this gruff voice from this old soldier in the corner piped up and broke the silence. "So are you a fire chief yet, or what?" Without missing a beat, I replied, "Yes, sir, right here at Bonsteel." I should have looked, of course, because I had no idea who it was. Situational awareness. Yes, I'm quite sure I've heard that somewhere before. Still stirring my coffee, I turned around, and suddenly it was all very clear. It was now Army Deputy Chief of Staff, 4-star General Jack Keane, in a tent at midnight in PTs. He stood up with kind of a half grin and reached out to shake my hand. As I shook that giant hand, he gave me a firm shake and silently chuckled at what must have been a pretty shocked look on my face. He didn't remember my name from years ago, but he remembered my face. He congratulated me on making chief and presented me with his Vice Chief of Staff coin. It was a pretty nice moment. During shift change the next morning, the guys asked if it was another eventful night. Not really, but a pretty crazy one. Thanksgiving 2003, I spent at Camp Junction City in Ramadi, Iraq. This is probably the one that stuck with me the most over the years. It is our custom in the Army. The leadership works during the holiday, and the enlisted troops are given a day off if at all possible. Ramadi, Iraq in 03 was no different. We worked a rotating guard force on the main gate, and during our shift, we were augmented with NCOs from other sections. Platoon did this for about 50% of our tour, so we had a pretty good grasp on how the operations usually went. And I personally wrote the SOP for gate security of Camp Junction City myself while I was there. Being said, there were no scheduled deliveries for the day. The Army works pretty diligently to ensure no unnecessary risks, especially during the holidays, if it can be avoided. So, no deliveries. Right about then, a semi with a tractor trailer full of eggs rolls up towards the gate, and it stopped at a distance barrier placed for the day about 200 meters ahead of the main gate. He gets out of the truck and starts walking towards me, yelling and waving his arms and all this stuff. I explained to him that there were no deliveries, and while he continued to walk towards me, then I raised up on him, where he promptly stopped and remained silent. About that 556 translator. Man, Haji's got to argue about everything. Am I right? I explained to him, which I can only assume he was all too well aware of, that this was an American holiday, and I really didn't want to shoot him over a truckload of eggs. That story wouldn't play out very well, whether he was the one who told it or I did later down the line. I'm really glad he decided that Friday might be a better day to do his work. One of our augmentees, an E4 from another battalion in our BCT, was due to show up that morning but did not. We called it in and his unit was notified. That morning, the deadly combination of war, missing the holidays and being away from home, as well as being very young, took its toll as this young man took his own life that day. Later that evening, our entire platoon went down to eat supper together, and it was then that one of my troops, not known to be a particularly religious person, not at all, did something completely unexpected. To pray before we ate our Thanksgiving meal together. You could have heard a pin drop in that dining facility. Nodded in silence and extended my hands, and we all held hands and prayed together as a platoon. For years, this particular Thanksgiving plagued my nightmares, created an anniversary reaction scenario that I wasn't even aware of. But then I heard about it, I studied it, and now I know how to combat it. Know your enemy. Like most of you, this past week or so, we've been incredibly busy, and I didn't even see it sneaking up on me quite as stealthily as it did. But then I caught it, dealt with it, and I'm releasing it right now. So whether you're home with your family or downrange with your battles, that you know how thankful we are here at home for all of your sacrifice and service. No matter where you are, you're never alone. When the Pilgrims landed at Plymouth Rock in 1620, they were grateful for not only their arrival to a new land, but for a place that they could live and worship freely without persecution. We here at Warfighter Ranch continue that grateful tradition by giving thanks. We thank God for his continual service and Jesus for his eternal sacrifice. And we thank the Warfighter Nation for theirs as well. So you see, there's a benefit in holding on to certain traditions, and oftentimes an even bigger benefit in letting others go. God bless you. We love you. And from Team Breland and Warfighter Ranch to you and yours, happy Thanksgiving.